live. This is Law Call.
Hey, and welcome to Law Call tonight. Tonight we're talking about fighting the insurance company. So if you have a question, been involved in an accident or an injury, feel free to give us a call. You can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com, or the phone lines are always open at 850-392-1544. I'm attorney Chris Young with the law firm of Perry & Young, and tonight I have my law partner with me, Les McFadder. And you can ask us any question that you want to, because Les has his iPad up here with all of the answers. If you have a question, give us a call. He'll Google it or something. But I
use the Google.
No, we're sitting here talking about WWE wrestling, so we can talk. We can
That's
talk about
right.
fighting the insurance companies, or WWE with the Undertaker and all. Jake Paul is.
Yeah, Jake Paul won. Yeah, Roman Reigns. That's what I was saying. My son's so disappointed because Roman Reigns.
You may be ruining it now for some people.
Well, I hope not. Well, you know. Anyway, Roman Reigns is my son's favorite wrestler, and he did not win tonight. And apparently, it was had he won, it would have been the longest reigning, no pun intended, WWE champion, but not meant to be.
The script writers didn't like it that way.
Did not want that outcome. So, and apparently they wanted Jake Paul to win. So that was also kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fighting the insurance company and.
Well, I'm gonna give a shout out.
But
Les fights insurance companies when he's not training the top 5 prospect or point guards known as Eli McFadder. I have to give a shout out to Eli because I'm gonna get it before you do, before you know the show.
Right. Yeah, he's training. I don't know about that. I'm not much of a trainer because I'm not a basketball player, but I don't know where he gets it from. But he's not too bad.
His looks and his athletic ability come from his mama. Trust me. Anyway,
definitely the looks.
Fighting the insurance companies. If you guys have questions tonight, feel free to give us a call 850-392-1544. You can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. Phone lines are open, but we actually already have some email questions that have come through, and we have one from Dan. My wife's car was in a hit and run at the beach. The uninsured driver was charged. We received an email from the public defender stating that her client would like to make you whole and reimburse you. They're hoping to get the charges dismissed. They implied they would cover our deductible of $500, but there were other expenses. We had to pay for a rental car while ours was in the shop. We also lost a full day of our Airbnb at the beach. Is it in poor taste to ask for these expenses to be covered too? Dan, I don't think that you're asking for enough.
I don't think he's asking for nearly enough. And I think, Dan, one of the things that, you mentioned a public defender. Anytime there's a crash like this, you have a hit and run or a DUI, something where there's a criminal element involved, oftentimes there's going to be 2 different legal tracks that a case can run down. You have the criminal track and you have the civil track. Public defender is a criminal defense lawyer that it's employed by the state for people that cannot afford to hire their own private counsel if they get charged with a crime. And usually if you're talking about reimbursement of expenses in the criminal context, you're talking about restitution. And it's typically very limited to a certain number of expenses, and there's really not always the full amount of money to fully make somebody whole. The civil side, on the other hand, which is what we do at Perry & Young, is we represent people for civil claims. We go after all of those things and then some. So if you have injuries, we pursue a claim for pain and suffering, medical expenses. If you miss time from work, lost wages. If you're going to miss time from work in the future for doctor's appointments or surgery, we make those claims as well. You mentioned losing your Airbnb, right, having a deductible. These are all consequential damages that we would also seek in a civil setting. So the best thing to do in that situation is to contact a lawyer like Perry & Young, and we'll go after getting all the expenses, all the damages to make you whole. The criminal side is going to run its course on a separate track. Sometimes there's a little bit of restitution, a lot of times there isn't. But really the public defender's goal in that is to try to get their person the best deal they can, and it's just not the best deal for you.
Right, unless that's what I was going to follow up with. Do you think that there's a deal trying to be cut by the public defender and the state attorney to either reduce this charge or to maybe get a lesser punishment, lesser sentence for her client if he were to reimburse and make somebody whole? But I think reimburse and make whole is almost like saying I have full coverage.
Right.
Full coverage is not really full coverage, and we're going to dive into that in just a second when we talk about uninsured, because apparently this guy was uninsured.
Right.
Okay. But that's not a crime. He wasn't arrested because he was uninsured. He was just arrested because it was a hit and run.
Right.
So, when you talk about making whole and reimbursement of your expenses, Dan, you're talking about Airbnb expenses and you're talking about your deductible, but Les, we've been doing this for over 20 years, both of us collect. I think you're in your 25th year, right?
26 this year.
Okay, wow, you're old, man.
Look at the beard, man, come on.
But we have seen this for decades where individuals, they get in an accident and they feel as if, hey, just, you ruined my vacation, pay these expenses and let's be done with it.
Right.
But when they get back home, all of a sudden they have some deficiencies when they're maybe going to work, some pain that they didn't have before, and all of a sudden they may have some serious medical injuries.
Yeah.
That making whole was not, making whole. And also, if you were to accept this gentleman, this public defender's office for this gentleman, and sign a document, you could relinquish any rights that you have going forward against your own insurance company if you sign a waiver. So let's explain to us why having uninsured motorists is important and why that is not technically considered full coverage on your insurance policy.
So in this particular case, uninsured motorist coverage may be the only monetary recovery that you can have. I mean, you mentioned the person that was a hit and run. Right. They were uninsured, meaning they did not have insurance. And so uninsured motorist coverage is a type of coverage you have under your own policy. You do have to pay a premium for it, but in the broad scheme of things, the premium is very low relative to the other types of coverages that you're required to have. Uninsured motorist steps into the shoes of the uninsured driver and compensates you up to the limits of that coverage. So if you get hit by this uninsured driver, let's say you have a policy that affords $50,000 of uninsured motorist coverage. You go to the doctor, you find out something's wrong with your back, something's wrong with your neck, you're having these weird feelings going down into your hands, down into your legs. The doctor looks at an MRI and says, oh, you're going to have surgery, or you're at least going to have pain management. It's going to cost all this money. Uninsured motorist coverage is the coverage that would step in to compensate you to pay for those expenses that you're likely to incur in the future. And it's even more important in the state of Florida because right now, Florida is the only state in the country that does not require a driver to carry bodily injury liability coverage, which is the type of coverage that if you cause a wreck, your bodily injury coverage is what would compensate the person you injured. Florida doesn't require it. And so statistically speaking, all these people that come in and say, I've got full coverage, 99% of the time what they have is the basic minimum legal coverage you're required to have in Florida, which does not cover your bodily injuries. And so if you don't have uninsured motorist coverage, statistically speaking, you're going to get hit by one of these people that has nothing to compensate you.
And it's not against the law to have just the bare bones minimum coverage. And that's why we call us a no-fault state, because no matter who's at fault, your own insurance company is going to pick up and start paying the first.
But if people really realized how minimal that coverage is, I mean, think of it this way. Property damage liability you're required to have, $10,000, all right? Chris, you know a little bit about cars.
That doesn't really cover much on cars, but I mean,
I mean, $10,000. So, I mean, if you have a newer car, shoot, you might have a car that's even several years old that's worth more than $10,000. If it gets totaled out, the person with full coverage isn't going to have enough money to pay for your vehicle. And then the $10,000 in PIP, the personal injury protection coverage, which is a medical benefit under your policy, you're required to have that. $10,000 doesn't even get you out of the emergency room if you have a CT scan at one of the local places. And so you really, this full coverage business, the basic is, I mean, I hate to say it, it's a joke. It is an absolute joke. And so you really need to protect yourself.
Well said. We do have a caller on the line, Mallory from Liberty County, with an accident question. Mallory, go ahead with your question. Oh. Okay, Mallory, we have some technical issues. I think we just dropped your call, so give us a few minutes, and if you will call back, we'll try to get up with you. Les, let's talk. What is no-fault insurance, PIP insurance? I mean, it is a joke. I mean, we see this day in and day out, and we've been seeing this for decades now. Both of us have.
Right.
And people just don't understand all the moving parts behind the scenes, because a lot of these major healthcare providers, they enjoy the PIP, the big hospitals, because they understand that they're going to get paid some of the money for someone just coming in for an accident versus having to bill Blue Cross and Blue Shield. The reimbursement rates are separate and apart and different, but we'll get into that later. But just break it down for us. Break it. I mean, what is PIP and why is it important? So
PIP is an acronym. It stands for Personal Injury Protection. What it is, it's a medical benefit that is tied to your auto policy. In order to go back to the beginning of it, PIP was a law that was passed back in 1972. That's the year I was born. Right? I'll be 52 this year.
The Dolphins were perfect in 1972.
The Dolphins were perfect in when they played 14 games instead of 16. But yeah, in 1972, this law was passed. And guess what the PIP limit was in 1972?
Let me guess.
$10,000. Exactly the same as it is today. 52 years later, it is still $10,000. So think about the cost of medicine in the last 52 years, and you get an idea of, when I say it's a joke in terms of the amount, you start to kind of understand that, because everybody knows about the cost of the cost of living, inflation over the past 52 years. So what it is everybody knows. A lot of people say, well, Florida's a no-fault state. And a lot of times they think, well, that means that I can't sue somebody if I get hurt because it's a no-fault state. That's not what it means. No-fault means that if you're involved in a motor vehicle wreck, you have this coverage available to you, whether it is your fault, someone else's fault, or nobody's fault. You know, you hit a deer and, you know, your airbags go off and you get hurt. You have this PIP coverage regardless if you're involved in a motor vehicle wreck to pay for any accident-related medical treatment. But again, it's only $10,000. It pays 80% of your medical expenses, not 100%. The other 20% is your responsibility. So you can use, you know, out-of-pocket money, or you can use your private health insurance, or if you have Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, those can be used to pick up the 20% that PIP doesn't cover. But once it's used up, it's gone. Right. And it's a mandatory coverage. It's one of the mandatory coverages that's required in the state of Florida, along with property damage liability. So, you know, you think about motor vehicle wrecks, and the majority of them are pretty minor. You know, you might have like a small little fender bender, and thankfully, you know, people don't get hurt. But for the ones where people do really get injured, or they have, you know, they think they're okay, but then the next day, like you said, they start to feel really stiff, and then the day after that, they're even worse. You'll find out that $10,000 in PIP benefits doesn't go very far. So you have to then rely upon your health insurance, which you've paid a premium for, and then you start to see how this expense just adds up and up and up. And so that's another reason why it's important to go back to the uninsured motorist.
And if you don't get a emergency medical condition diagnosis within 14 days of an accident, guess what? Your $10,000 now becomes $2,500.
So the law passed in '72, and then in 2013 it was amended, and that $10,000 benefit has a condition now. It used to be you got $10,000 in medical benefit.
Because you paid for it.
Because you paid for it. You still pay the premium, but now there's an extra condition. Now you have to see a doctor within 14 days, and that doctor has to evaluate you as having an emergency medical condition. Now, if you pull out your Gray's Anatomy book, or if doctors out there, if you pull out some of your textbook, you're not going to find emergency medical condition as a medical term. It's not a medical term, it's a legislative term. Basically what it means is, were you hurt? Did you feel like you need to go see the doctor? Was it bad enough for you to go see the doctor? Okay, check the box, you got an emergency medical condition. Well, if you don't check that box within 14 days, your $10,000 benefit goes down to $2,500, even though you've paid the premium for $10,000. Now your benefits have been cut by 75%. Now the takeaway is,
go ahead, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
Call somebody that can advise you on what your rights and responsibilities are if you're involved in a wreck, and that's what we do.
Didn't we say PIP was a joke?
PIP was a joke.
Yes, amen. We're going to take our first break of the evening. Keep in mind we're having some technical difficulties. We'll get that out on our phone, so you can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com, and we'll take your questions. Be back in just a moment. And welcome back to Law Call. Guys, we do have a technical difficulty, so you're going to have to email us your questions at lawcall@wmbb.com. Our producers in the back are doing their best trying to get a part fixed, but I think they just told us that that is not going to happen before the show ends tonight.
That's right. That's right.
And so there won't be any phone calls live on the air, but you can always email us, and they'll put it in an email for us and put it to us. So email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. I think we do have an email question that came in during the break. Well, from Will, can insurers raise your rates if the accident wasn't your fault? And Will, thank you for asking that question. Les?
Right. So the lawyer answer is, well, it's not really a lawyer answer. We always say it depends on the facts. Here's the situation with that. Under Florida law, your insurance company is not supposed to raise your rates for you making a claim for something that was not your fault, okay? That's the condition. The premium they accept is the condition for them covering you in the event something happens. So they can't say, well, you know, you got in this wreck, it wasn't your fault, we're going to go ahead and raise your rates. Now, they can drop you if they think that you're a higher risk. And they can raise your rates for other things that aren't related to the wreck. And that's typically what we see happen. Somebody has a 2015 pickup truck, they get in a wreck, it gets totaled out, they go and they buy themselves a 2024 pickup truck. Well, guess what? It's going to cost more to insure a newer vehicle, and the rates are going to go up. So there are some reasons they can, if the risks change, if the vehicle's newer, if you change your address, if you change the use of the vehicle, you want to use it for ride share, that can change your premiums. There's a lot of things that they can raise your rates for, but simply making a claim for something that was not your fault is not one of the reasons they can raise your rates.
And I think to summarize that, insurance companies have a lot of authority and leeway in the state of Florida.
Yes.
So they can always just cancel you or raise your rates as they see fit, regardless. Now, we always talk about a chargeable event, and Will, thank you for that question, because that's what you would call a chargeable event on your policy. Typically, if you were involved in the accident and caused the accident, you'd be sitting here expecting that your rates probably would go up because you were at fault. Well, what I have seen over the last several years is that insurance companies are trying to recoup whether it's investments that they're not making their money off of, or just basically the cost of living today. And your typical car is not going to be $10,000 on the roadway anymore. It's a lot more than that now. Right. And so they're going to raise your rates. Parts are expensive, and like Les said, especially if you're trying to make ends meet and trying to get into some of the ride-sharing programs, they look at that as well, and you need to do a cost-benefit analysis to make sure that what you're going to make off the ride share is going to cover your insurance premium and cover that.
I tell you what will absolutely cause your insurance to go up.
Having a 16-year-old son.
Having a 16-year-old son, that will definitely do it. Having a 16-year-old daughter, not so much, but having a 16-year-old son will absolutely cause those rates to skyrocket.
Yeah. Will, thank you for the question. I do appreciate that. We do have another question from Tia. Excuse me. My older sister was involved in a car accident in which the other party was definitely at fault. Her medical bills total $3,500 plus $3,500 in lost wages. She's 38 years old and female. What would be a reasonable reimbursement if you include pain and suffering, Tia?
You know what, Tia, I'm glad you asked that question, because I was having this conversation with an insurance adjuster earlier this week. We were talking about how to value a claim, and in my case, my client has very good health insurance. She's a member of the military, so she has TRICARE, and TRICARE reimbursement rates like Medicare, Medicaid, Florida Blue, their reimbursement rates, what they actually pay a doctor is not actually what the doctor charges. So, for example, you go to the hospital, you get an MRI, they may charge $1,500 for the MRI, but that's not what these insurance companies pay. They pay a fraction of that, maybe 20 cents on the dollar, 25 cents on the dollar. That's their reimbursement rate, and that's ultimately what the person is allowed to recover. And so in this particular case, the adjuster's like, well, her medical bills are only this, and her medical bills are only that. I don't care what the medical bills are. I care about what the injury is. What's the effect it's going to have on your life? I've seen cases where people have lost limbs, have had to have multi-level neck surgeries, have had catastrophic injuries, had to get knee replacements, broken hips, or they've had small medical bills because they had really good insurance or because they got a charitable write-off. Right. But those injuries are way worse than, somebody that, you still have like whiplash type injuries, which are still serious, but to a lesser degree. So I've really, when I'm talking with insurance adjusters, I try to focus away from what the bills are. Now, if the bills are really obviously, well, look, these bills are here, but if they're low, I mean, I'm more worried about what the injury is, because that's really where the value is. How's it affected your life? You mentioned lost wages. What do you do for a living? Are you going to be able to continue doing the job in that same capacity? What do you like to do for fun? You know, are you young? Do you like to get out and exercise? Do you do some sort of, like to do surf or CrossFit or something like that? Has your quality of life been affected? Those are the driving factors for when we look into the non-economic damages, which is a big component of what we fight for on behalf of injured people. The non-economic damages for pain and suffering, mental anguish, inconvenience, loss of the capacity for enjoyment of life. Those are the things that really matter to people.
Yeah.
Not, well, my bill is $1,000. My bill is $3,500.
Well, that's what the insurance companies want you to
Right.
look at. You're not so hurt. Here's your $1,000. I'll tell you what. Here's $2,000. We're going to be the good Samaritan here.
Right. And so, it's hard to say based on what you said. $3,500 in medical bills, $3,500 in lost wages. Obviously, you have $7,000 in economic damages. But what was the real impact on this person's life? Is it worth another 25, 30, 50, 100? We don't know. We don't know. Sometimes injuries are very catastrophic, but because they're so catastrophic, there's nothing that can be done medically. And then you have a relatively low medical expense because, oh, that person lost their eye. There's nothing we can do about it. Well, guess what? This person's not going to have an eye for the rest of their life. So you really got to look at the injury to really be able to say with any degree of certainty what a claim is worth. Ultimately, either the parties decide or you take it to a jury and a jury decides what's worth, what that is worth, and both of those carry their risks and rewards.
Les, we call this show Fighting the Insurance Company. And I think one thing that may go unsaid is we do actually fight the insurance companies. It's not like a physical boxing match. It feels like it sometimes, but it's not a boxing match. And the reason I bring that up is it's just not a catchy phrase or a slogan. We actually go to battle every day for people who are deserving to be compensated for their injuries. And keep in mind, insurance companies have attorneys that work for them 24 hours a day. Let's just say 25 hours a day, 8 days a week.
Right.
24/7, round clock. And shouldn't you have someone advocating for you? Because trust me, they have somebody advocating for them. And every phone call that is made on an insurance company's behalf is then under the direction or training or education of counsel at some point.
And an even bigger reason why you need somebody in your corner for that is because, we've talked about these various laws. We've talked about PIP.
Right.
We've talked in past shows about tort reform that was passed last year. We talked in the past about property damage reform that was passed. All of these laws that were passed under the guise of we're going to bring your rates down, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I'm pretty confident in saying that I don't think anybody's rates have gone down since these laws have been passed, number one. But number two, it's the insurance lobby that writes these laws that gets these lawmakers to pass them. And so they've already got the upper hand. You really need to have somebody that understands that and understands how to talk their language and how to box them in, because there are still ways you can put pressure on insurance companies.
You still have rights in the state of Florida.
You absolutely still have rights, but it can be a very complicated system, and you need somebody that knows what they're doing.
Right. We're going to take our last break of the evening. I would say the phone lines are still open. They are still open, but you're going to have to email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. We'll be back in just a moment. welcome back to Law Call. We're going to jump right into an email question from Kathy, and then we're going to do our shout outs. I have stacked insurance, which is extremely expensive. Can you explain the advantage? Thank you. Les, teed it up for you, brother.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Stacked insurance. So when we're talking about uninsured motorist coverage, like we talked about before, you can elect to have what they call stacking. It makes sense if you have multiple vehicles, because what stacking is, it means it stacks the policies. You basically multiply the coverage. So if you have a $50,000 uninsured motorist policy with 3 vehicles in the household, you've got $150,000 of uninsured motorist coverage. Usually the difference between the stacking premium and the non-stacking premium isn't that much.
You're right.
But obviously it's something, talk to your agent about it. I would definitely encourage, if you do, definitely have uninsured motorist, and definitely get it stacked if you can.
And if you have questions, and if you can't get to your agent, which we have some wonderful agents in Bay County, call our law firm. It seems like every week we do get phone calls throughout the week, and we're helping somebody understand their policy and kind of guiding them in the right direction of what to do and what to purchase. You always have to consider what you can afford at the same time and what kind of limits you can get, but we always tell you get as much insurance as you can afford on a monthly basis or whatever, and get the stacking uninsured motorist coverage. Les, we're going to jump right into shout outs. We both have a mutual one. Rick from the Grand Marlin.
Rick from the Marlin.
Right.
That's
Rick
right.
From the Marlin, right. I'll let you go ahead, buddy.
All right, Miss Pam, thank you again for always watching. Give a shout out to my mom and dad, my beautiful wife Jen, my kids Rachel and Eli watching. My neighbors Jamie and Ed. Jamie just rang the bell, cancer free. So I wanted to give her a special shout out, Jamie. And Nick and Lauren watching us out on the West End.
Oh, cool deal. My wife Ashley's watching, my mother's watching, Trey Smith, Judy Smith, Paula Frederick, and Uncle Roy Myers from Laurel, Mississippi is tuning in every Sunday night on Facebook Live. So
why didn't he call?
It's a good thing that he doesn't.
It's probably
call.
past his bedtime.
No. No, it's probably not.
He doesn't get reception where he's at.
It's probably not past his bedtime. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. It's been a great show. If you have questions, you can always email us during the week at lawcall@wmbb.com or call our law firm. We'll be glad to help you. Same time, same place next week. Maybe 2 different guys, but I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm gonna be in Orlando at a basketball tournament next week.
Chasing that point guard and showing him some news. But anyways, good night, good guys, and have a great weekend.
Night.